The void screamed silently as the star cruiser, Odyssey, ripped apart. Alarms blared, a useless cacophony against the shriek of tearing metal and the explosive decompression that sucked air, debris, and unfortunate crew members into the unforgiving vacuum. Pilot Jason Ward fought the controls, his knuckles white, sweat stinging his eyes as warning lights painted the cockpit in strobes of red and amber. The ship bucked like a dying beast, its structural integrity failing catastrophically after an unexpected encounter with an uncharted gravimetric shear. Navigation consoles sparked, spitting arcs of electricity. The main view screen cracked, crazing into a spiderweb pattern that showed the swirling emerald and sapphire gem of the planet below, growing terrifyingly large. Nayara Prime, uncharted, unwelcoming. Mayday, Mayday, Jason choked out, his voice ragged over the comms. Though he knew it was futile, long-range communications were gone, fried by the shear. This is Lieutenant Jason Ward, pilot of the exploration vessel Odyssey. Ship designation EVOS EVN-34. We are breaking up. Repeat, breaking up. Estimated atmospheric entry. Imminent. The ship groaned. A final, tortured sound before the forward section tore away completely, spinning off into the darkness like a discarded toy. Jason was thrown violently against his restraints, the G-forces crushing him into his seat. Through the fractured view screen, he saw the planet rush up to meet him, a maelstrom of green and blue clouds. He wrestled with the auxiliary controls, trying to stabilize the remaining section, his escape pod, anything. Fire licked at the edges of the ruptured bulkhead behind him. The air grew thick with acrid smoke. Atmosphere hit like a physical blow, a sudden, violent deceleration that threatened to tear the remaining hull to pieces. Friction turned the air outside the viewport into a sheath of incandescent plasma. Jason fought for consciousness, his vision tunneling. The automated systems, miraculously still partially functional, deployed emergency parachutes, secondary and tertiary drogues snapping out with bone-jarring force. The descent slowed, but it was still far too fast, far too uncontrolled. Trees, impossibly tall and crowned with foliage in hues of violet and crimson, rushed upwards. The jungle canopy was a dense, unbroken sea of alien life. Impact was inevitable. Jason braced himself, uttering a final, desperate curse as the escape pod section smashed through the thick canopy, shearing branches the size of girders, before slamming into the damp, mossy earth with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. Silence descended, broken only by the frantic ticking of cooling metal and the distant, unsettling calls of unseen creatures. Jason hung in his restraints, darkness encroaching on the edges of his vision. Pain flared in his left arm and ribs. He tasted blood. With a monumental effort, he reached up and unbuckled the harness, slumping forward against the console. Sparks still spat intermittently from a damaged panel, the air filtering and smelled damp, loamy, thick with the scent of unknown blossoms and decay. Survival. The word echoed in his mind, the core tenet of his training. Assess the situation, secure the area, seek resources. He fumbled for the emergency kit release, his fingers clumsy. The small panel popped open, revealing a compact med kit, a signal beacon useless without orbital support, a water purification unit, a multi-tool, and a standard issue pulse pistol. Standard procedure. Except nothing about Nayara Prime felt standard. He forced the escape pod hatch open, the mechanism groaning in protest. Humid, heavy air washed over him, thick enough to taste. He peered out into a world bathed in the filtered, greenish light that penetrated the dense canopy. Giant ferns, taller than a man, unfurled intricate fronds. Mosses in electric blues and phosphorescent yellows clung to the bark of colossal trees, whose roots snaked across the forest floor like petrified tentacles. The air vibrated with the buzz and chirp of alien insects, the rustle of unseen things moving through the undergrowth. It was beautiful, in a terrifying, overwhelming way. He needed to get clear of the wreckage, find water, assess his injuries properly. He eased himself out of the pod, his legs trembling. A sharp pain shot up his left side as he put weight on it. Broken ribs, definitely. Possibly a fractured arm. He leaned against the hull, taking deep, measured breaths, trying to ignore the throbbing pain. He activated the medkit's diagnostic scanner, pressing it against his side. Multiple rib fractures, hairline fracture in the left ulna, internal bruising. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but debilitating. The kit administered a painkiller and a sealant spray for the minor lacerations on his face and hands. The relief was temporary, dulling the sharp edges of the pain but leaving a heavy ache. He holstered the pulse pistol, checked its charge, full, and slung the emergency kit over his shoulder, moving slowly, deliberately. He began to pick his way through the dense undergrowth, away from the crash site. The ground was soft, spongy, covered in layers of decaying vegetation. Strange, luminous fungi pulsed with faint light in the deeper shadows. Every rustle, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He felt watched, a primal instinct screaming that he was an intruder in a world that did not know him, and certainly did not welcome him. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed to warp in the unchanging twilight beneath the canopy. He found a stream, the water running clear and cool over smooth, gray stones. Using the purification unit, he drank deeply, the simple act momentarily grounding him. He examined the crash site from a distance, hidden behind a cluster of giant, pitcher-like plants. The mangled pod was a stark, metallic scar against the overwhelming green. No immediate signs of scavengers, but he couldn't stay close. As dusk began to settle, painting the filtered light in deeper shades of purple and indigo, the sounds of the jungle changed. New calls echoed, lower, guttural, more menacing. The air grew cooler. He needed shelter. He found a shallow overhang beneath the roots of one of the titanic trees, barely large enough to crawl into. He cleared the space of debris, checked for hidden creatures, and settled in, pulling his thin survival blanket around him. The pulse pistol lay heavy in his lap. Sleep seemed impossible, every nerve ending alight with fear and pain. He must have dozed off, exhaustion finally claiming him. Because he woke with a start, unsure what had disturbed him. The jungle was quieter now, but it was a watchful silence, pregnant with unseen tension. Then he heard it, not a growl, not a screech, but rhythmic, heavy footsteps. Something large was moving nearby, and it was moving towards him. He gripped the pistol, thumbing the safety off. His heart hammered against his fractured ribs. He peered out from his meager shelter, eyes straining in the gloom, now illuminated by the eerie glow of bioluminescent flora. Shapes began to resolve in the darkness, tall figures, moving with a fluid, predatory grace. They were humanoid, but powerfully built, covered in sleek, dark fur that seemed to absorb the faint light. Their features were feline, with large, intelligent eyes that glowed faintly yellow, pointed ears twitching atop their heads, and long, muscular tails swaying behind them. They carried spears tipped with sharpened obsidian or bone. Beastwomen, not just animals, but sentient beings, warriors. They fanned out, their movements coordinated, silent. They were tracking him. They knew he was here. One figure, slightly taller than the others, with intricate braided patterns in her dark fur and an aura of command, stopped directly in front of his hiding place. She tilted her head, her luminous eyes seeming to pierce the shadows, fixing directly on his. There was no malice in her gaze, but an intense, unnerving curiosity. He held his breath, pistol held tight, but he didn't raise it. Firing would be suicide. The leader knelt down, moving with astonishing speed and silence. Her face was close now. He could see the sharp canines peeking from behind her lips, the intricate markings on her high cheekbones. The sheer power coiled in her shoulders. She sniffed the air, her nostrils flaring slightly. Her gaze dropped to his injured arm, then to the pulse pistol in his lap. She made a low sound in her throat, a rumbling purr that vibrated in the air. It wasn't threatening, more like contemplation. She reached out a hand, slowly, deliberately. Her fingers were long, tipped with retractable claws, but her touch was surprisingly gentle as she brushed aside the ferns obscuring his shelter. Her eyes met his again, holding his gaze captive. There was an ancient wisdom in those yellow depths, an intelligence that transcended language barriers. He remained utterly still, every instinct screaming, yet strangely unafraid. Then, the unexpected happened. She leaned closer, her feline face just inches from his. He could feel the warmth radiating from her. Her tongue, rough like sandpaper, flicked out and deliberately, ritually, licked a stripe up the side of his face, from his jaw to his temple. The gesture was shocking, intimate, utterly alien. Jason froze, bewildered. The Beastwoman drew back, a soft, guttural sound rising in her chest. She looked at the other warriors gathering behind her, their spears held ready, their yellow eyes wide with surprise. She spoke, her voice a low, melodic growl, filled with complex tones he couldn't decipher. But the meaning, somehow, seemed clear. The other warriors lowered their spears, their tense stances relaxing into expressions of awe, confusion, and reverence. The leader turned back to Jason, her eyes holding a new intensity. She offered him her hand, palm up, a clear gesture of invitation, or perhaps command. He hesitated, looking from her hand to the assembled warriors, then back to her compelling gaze. What choice did he have? Slowly, painfully, he shifted, reaching out his uninjured hand and placing it in hers. Her grip was strong, firm, calloused from a life he couldn't begin to imagine. She pulled him gently to his feet, supporting his weight as his injured side protested. She spoke again, a single word, repeated softly, like an invocation. Lifebound. She tugged him forward, out of the shelter and into the midst of the waiting warriors. They parted respectfully, their gazes filled with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. The leader, whose presence radiated an undeniable authority, kept his hand firmly in hers, leading him away from the crash site, deeper into the heart of the bioluminescent jungle. He didn't know where they were going, or what the strange ritual meant. He only knew that his struggle for survival had just taken a sharp, bewildering turn. He had been found, claimed, by the ruling Beastwoman of this alien world, and designated by a name that resonated with ancient power, Lifebound. His life was no longer solely his own. The journey through the jungle was a disorienting blur of towering flora, alien sounds, and the silent, powerful presence of his escorts. The Beastwoman leader, whose name he would later learn was Kayla, maintained her grip on his hand, her pace steady but mindful of his injuries. The other warriors formed a protective perimeter around them, their senses constantly scanning the surroundings, their movements economical and precise. Jason, hampered by pain and disorientation, stumbled frequently, but Kyla's grip was iron, preventing him from falling. He tried to speak, to ask questions, but the sounds that came out were hoarse and meaningless. Language was a chasm between them, yet Kayla seemed to understand his condition, occasionally slowing her pace or glancing back with an unreadable expression in her luminous eyes. They traveled for what felt like hours, moving deeper into territory untouched by any sign of technology or off-world influence. The air grew thicker, richer with the scent of damp earth and unknown blossoms. Finally, the dense jungle began to thin, opening into a vast clearing dominated by colossal, interconnected trees whose upper branches formed a living canopy high above. Structures were woven into the trunks and lower branches, dwellings made of wood, vine, and hide, connected by intricate rope bridges and ladders. Smoke curled lazily from openings in the canopy, carrying the scent of cooking meat and herbs. Dozens of Nayara. The name Jason mentally assigned the Beastwomen based on the planet, paused in their activities, their yellow eyes widening as the hunting party returned with their strange, injured captive. Children, smaller versions of the adults with softer fur and boundless curiosity, peeked from doorways and platforms, their pointed ears swiveling. Elders, their fur streaked with gray, but their eyes still sharp, watched with solemn intensity from shaded balconies. A murmur rippled through the treetop village, a wave of sound composed of low growls, chirps, and clicks. Kayla led Jason towards the base of the largest tree, a veritable giant whose trunk was easily 30 meters in diameter, a wide, spiraling ramp, carved directly into the wood and worn smooth by generations of use, led upwards into the heart of the settlement. As they ascended, Jason felt hundreds of eyes on him. He was an anomaly, an outsider, clothed in strange fabrics, pale-skinned and furless, clearly injured. Yet, the presence of Kyla at his side seemed to grant him passage, albeit a wary one. The initial shock on the faces of the villagers morphed into a complex mix of curiosity, suspicion, and, directed towards Kayla, a profound respect. She was clearly their leader, her authority unquestioned. They reached a large, open platform high in the central tree. It served as a communal area with fire pits, woven mats, and tools neatly arranged. Kayla finally released his hand, turning to address her people. Her voice, though still guttural to Jason's ears, carried clearly across the space. She spoke for several minutes, her tone shifting from commanding to explanatory, her gestures encompassing Jason, the jungle they had emerged from, and the sky above. Though he understood none of the words, the import was clear. She was explaining who he was, how he was found, and perhaps the significance of the ritual licking. The word Lifebound was repeated several times. Each utterance met with murmurs and shifts in the crowd. When she finished speaking, an older Nayara, his fur almost white around the muzzle, stepped forward. He carried a staff carved with intricate symbols and wore adornments of polished stones and feathers. He looked Jason up and down, his ancient eyes sharp and assessing. He spoke to Kayla, his voice raspy with age, and gestured towards Jason's injuries. Kayla responded, her tone respectful but firm. After a brief exchange, the elder nodded slowly and turned back to Jason. He approached cautiously, making a series of soft clicking sounds, perhaps meant to be reassuring. He gestured towards Jason's arm and side. Understanding dawned. This must be their healer, their shaman. Jason nodded slowly, indicating his willingness to be examined. The shaman's touch was surprisingly gentle as his calloused fingers probed the fractures. His examination far more thorough than the medkit scanner. He produced a pouch filled with a thick, greenish paste that smelled strongly of herbs and mud. With gestures, He indicated he wanted to apply it to Jason's injuries. Hesitantly, Jason allowed it. The paste was cool at first, then radiated a deep, penetrating warmth that eased the throbbing ache far more effectively than the off-world painkillers. The shaman then bound his ribs and arm tightly with strips of soft, pliable hide. While the healer worked, Kayla watched, her expression unreadable. Other Nayarans brought food, roasted meat from some unknown creature, fibrous tubers, and large, juicy fruits, and water in hollowed gourds. Jason ate cautiously at first, but hunger quickly overcame his apprehension. The food was strange but nourishing. Communication remained a significant barrier. He tried pointing and using simple gestures, but conveying complex thoughts was impossible. Kayla seemed to possess an intuitive understanding, often anticipating his needs before he could express them. She assigned 2 younger Nayarans, one male named Rorik and one female named Lyra, to attend to him. They were less intimidating than the seasoned warriors, their curiosity outweighing their suspicion. Through patient repetition and pantomime over the next few days, Jason began to pick up rudimentary words and phrases. Water, food, pain, sleep. He learned Kayla's name, and she learned his, repeating Jason with a soft, growling cadence. His recovery progressed steadily under the shaman's care and the strange efficacy of the herbal poultices. He spent his days observing the Nayarans, learning their routines. They were hunter-gatherers, living in close harmony with the jungle. Their senses were incredibly acute, their strength and agility far exceeding human norms. They revered the natural world, seeing spirits and power in the great trees, the flowing water, the creatures they hunted. Their society was tribal, centered around Kayla, who was not just a chieftain, but seemed to hold a spiritual significance as well. Tied intrinsically to the concept of the Lifebound, he learned, through fractured conversations and observation, that the Lifebound was a figure from their ancient prophecies, an outsider, sky-fallen, who would arrive at a time of great need, bound by fate to the tribe's leader, destined to help protect them from a looming shadow. Kayla's ritual licking hadn't been random. It was a test, a way to sense a connection foretold by generations of shamans. His arrival, crashing from the sky, wounded but alive, seemed to fit the narrative perfectly. Jason remained deeply skeptical. Prophecies, destined mates. It sounded like primitive superstition, a way to make sense of the unexpected arrival of an alien. He was a pilot, a man of science and logic, not fate. Yet, he couldn't deny the reverence in their eyes when they looked at him, the weight of expectation that settled upon him. And he couldn't deny the growing connection he felt towards Kayla. She was fierce, intelligent, burdened by leadership but carrying it with grace. She visited him daily, checking on his recovery, attempting communication. Her presence a strange mix of commanding and comforting. There was an undeniable pull between them, an unspoken understanding that transcended the vast cultural and biological differences. As his strength returned, Jason knew he couldn't remain an invalid. To earn genuine acceptance, not just tolerance based on prophecy, he had to prove his worth according to their standards. He began helping with simple tasks, mending tools, reinforcing structures, learning the basics of tracking from Rorik. His technological knowledge was mostly useless here, but his problem-solving skills and different perspectives sometimes offered novel solutions to everyday challenges. The first true test came unexpectedly. A hunting party returned late, carrying one of their own gravely injured. He had been gored by a thorn-backed grazer, a large herbivore known for its territorial aggression and razor-sharp dorsal spines. The shaman worked tirelessly, but the wound was deep, infection setting in rapidly. Jason watched, feeling helpless, until he remembered the medkit. While the shaman's herbs fought the infection, the kit contained broad-spectrum antibiotics and advanced coagulants far beyond the tribe's medicine. He retrieved the kit from his salvaged belongings, explaining its function through gestures to the skeptical shaman and a watchful Kayla. Understanding the risk, introducing unknown elements into their delicate ecosystem, but desperate to save the warrior, Kayla gave her assent. Jason carefully administered the correct dosage. The effect was dramatic. Within hours, the fever began to subside, the bleeding stopped, and the warrior's breathing eased. By the next day, he was clearly on the mend. The act earned Jason a measure of genuine respect. He hadn't relied on prophecy, but on his own knowledge and resources. Sharing them for the good of the tribe, it was a turning point. But true integration required more than medical intervention. It required facing the dangers of Nayara Prime alongside the Nayarans. Kayla knew this. The elders knew this. The time for trials was approaching. He had been declared Lifebound. Now he had to prove he deserved the title, not just for himself, but for the tribe that had cautiously begun to accept him as one of their own, bound to their formidable leader. The first trial was one of strength and courage, designed to test his mettle against the wilds of Nayara Prime. Kayla herself announced it during a gathering on the central platform, her voice resonating with authority. Jason, now mostly healed though still aching, stood before the assembled tribe, acutely aware of their appraising gazes. Kayla explained, with Rorik providing halting translations supplemented by gestures, that Jason must retrieve a scale from a razor-scale wyvern, a massive, amphibious predator inhabiting the deep swamps south of their territory. It was a creature feared even by seasoned Nayaran hunters, known for its blinding speed in water, armored hide, and paralyzing neurotoxin delivered through its barbed tail. Fear coiled in Jason's stomach, cold and tight. This wasn't a simulation, not a training exercise. It was life or death. But refusing was not an option. It would mean rejecting the tribe, rejecting Kayla, admitting he was unworthy of the Lifebound title they had bestowed upon him. He looked at Kayla, saw the confidence in her yellow eyes. Not confidence that he would succeed easily, but confidence that he possessed the inner strength to try. He nodded his assent, his voice firmer than he felt. I accept the trial. Rorik and Lyra were assigned to guide him, not to help him obtain the scale, but to ensure he reached the swamp territory and, should he fail, to report his fate. The journey took 2 days, deeper into the humid, alien jungle than he had ever been. The air grew thick with the stench of stagnant water and decay. Giant, mangrove-like trees with tangled, stilt-like roots choked the waterways. Strange, croaking amphibians leaped from muddy banks, and iridescent insects swarmed in buzzing clouds. Rorik and Lyra moved with practiced ease, their senses alert, pointing out dangers Jason would have easily missed. Quicksand pits hidden beneath innocent-looking moss, vines that constricted like pythons, fungi that released soporific spores. They reached the edge of the swamp proper, a vast expanse of murky water, floating islands of vegetation, and ancient gnarled trees draped in hanging moss. Wyvern territory, Rorik growled softly, pointing towards a series of large, disturbed mudflats along the bank. It hunts here. Be watchful. Fast in water. Strong, Lyra added, her voice hushed. Tail sting. Sleep forever. They would wait for him at the edge of the swamp. The task was his alone. Jason checked his pulse pistol, its familiar weight a small comfort. He carried a Nayaran hunting knife, a length of strong vine rope, and the knowledge that failure meant more than just his own death. It meant failing the people who had taken him in. Taking a deep breath, he slipped into the murky water, the cool liquid quickly soaking his trousers. He moved slowly, carefully, trying to minimize ripples, scanning the water's surface and the shadowy banks. Hours passed under the oppressive humidity. The silence of the swamp was unnerving, broken only by the drone of insects and the plop of unseen things dropping into the water. He saw evidence of the wyvern, massive, three-toed tracks in the mud, trees scored by enormous claws, the half-eaten carcass of some large swamp creature floating near a bank. The sheer size and power indicated by these signs were terrifying. He finally spotted it, lying partially submerged near a cluster of dead trees, only its ridged back and reptilian head visible above the waterline. It was immense, easily 15 meters long, its scales shimmering with an oily, metallic sheen. Its eyes, cold and black, scanned the surroundings with reptilian indifference. Its long, segmented tail swayed gently beneath the surface, the wicked barb at its tip occasionally breaking the water. Jason froze, his heart pounding. How could he possibly get close enough to take a scale without being instantly detected and devoured? A direct approach was suicide. He needed a distraction, a plan. He scanned the environment. A large colony of noisy, bird-like creatures nested in the branches above the wyvern. If he could startle them, he slowly backed away, circling through the shallower water and thick undergrowth until he was positioned behind the nesting colony. Finding a loose rock, he hurled it high into the branches. The rock crashed through the leaves, causing the bird creatures to erupt in a cacophony of panicked squawks and flapping wings. Dozens took flight, circling noisily overhead. The wyvern's head snapped up, its attention momentarily diverted by the sudden commotion. It was the chance Jason needed. Moving as quickly and silently as he could, he waded towards the creature's flank, pistol held ready. Though he knew it would do little against such thick armor, he focused on the large, overlapping scales near the creature's midsection. He needed one, just one loose scale. He saw it, a slightly damaged scale near the waterline, its edge lifted almost imperceptibly. He reached the wyvern's side, the creature still distracted by the birds. Water swirled around his waist. He could smell the creature's musky, reptilian scent. Taking the knife, he slid the blade carefully under the edge of the loose scale, praying it would pry off without alerting the beast. The scale resisted. He applied more pressure, his muscles straining. Suddenly, the wyvern shifted, its massive head swinging back towards him, its cold, black eye fixed on him. A low hiss escaped its jaws, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. Jason yanked desperately at the scale. It came free with a grating pop, a heavy, iridescent plate about the size of his hand. At the same moment, the wyvern lunged, its jaws snapping shut. Where Jason's head had been a split second before, he scrambled backwards, falling into the deeper water. The scale clutched tightly in his hand. The wyvern surged after him, surprisingly fast, its powerful tail whipping through the water. Jason fired the pulse pistol, aiming for its eye. The energy bolt sizzled, striking the armored brow ridge, causing the creature to recoil with an enraged roar but doing no significant damage. It bought him precious seconds. He turned and swam frantically towards the bank, the wyvern churning the water behind him. Just as he reached the muddy shore, gasping for air, the wyvern's tail lashed out. Jason threw himself sideways, landing hard on the bank. The barbed tip missed his body by centimeters, embedding itself deep in the mud where he had been standing. A clear, viscous fluid oozed from the barb, the neurotoxin. He scrambled further up the bank, not stopping until he collapsed behind the relative safety of a thick root bowl. The razor scale clutched triumphantly in his hand. The wyvern roared again in frustration, then slowly submerged, disappearing back into the murky depths. He lay there for a long time, shaking, catching his breath, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving behind exhaustion and the deep ache in his ribs. He had done it. He had faced the beast and survived. He had the scale. Rorik and Lyra emerged cautiously from the tree line, their eyes wide with astonishment and relief. Rorik let out a low whistle of appreciation as Jason held up the heavy, shimmering scale. Lyra offered him a water skin, her earlier suspicion replaced by open admiration. The journey back was less tense, filled with Rorik's attempts to convey praise and Lyra's quiet respect. When they arrived back at the village, word of his success had already spread. The Nayarans gathered again. Their expressions changed. The skepticism was largely gone, replaced by genuine acceptance. He presented the scale to Kayla, laying it at her feet as custom seemed to dictate. She picked it up, examining its weight and texture, then met his gaze. A slow smile touched her feline features, a rare expression that lit up her eyes. She spoke, her voice carrying across the platform. "Jason, Lifebound, you have courage. You have proven strength." The tribe responded with a chorus of approving growls and clicks. He had passed the first trial. He wasn't just the sky-fallen stranger anymore. He was Jason, the Lifebound who had faced the razor-scale wyvern and returned. He had earned his place, not through prophecy alone, but through action. His bond with Kayla deepened, unspoken but palpable, and for the first time since crashing on Nayara Prime, Jason felt a flicker of something that might, eventually, feel like belonging. But he knew, deep down, that more trials awaited him on this beautiful, dangerous world. The second trial was not of physical strength, but of inner fortitude and connection to the spirit of Nayara Prime. It was the Vision Quest, a ritual undertaken only by those destined for leadership or profound spiritual roles within the tribe. The old shaman, whose name Jason learned was Zathran, explained its purpose. Rorik and Lyra struggling to translate the complex concepts. Jason was to journey alone to the Grove of Whispering Ancestors, a sacred place deep within the oldest part of the jungle. Ingest a ceremonial concoction brewed from rare psychotropic fungi, and open his mind to the voices of the world and the wisdom of those who came before. It was a journey into the self, a confrontation with one's deepest fears and truths. Kayla herself oversaw his preparation. She brought him a simple tunic woven from soft fibers and painted his face with sacred symbols using clays of ochre and blue. Her touch was gentle, deliberate, her eyes searching his, conveying a silent encouragement mixed with concern. "Be strong," she murmured, one of the few phrases they both understood clearly. "Face the shadows. Find your truth." Zathran provided the concoction in a small, intricately carved wooden bowl. It was a thick, dark liquid that smelled earthy and pungent. "Drink deep." Zathran instructed through Rorik, "Do not fight the visions. Listen, learn. The jungle speaks to those who are open." With the tribe watching solemnly, Jason accepted the bowl and drank the bitter liquid in one go. It tasted vile, coating his tongue. He was given a small pouch of water and directions to the grove, a place marked by ancient, luminous trees said to retain the echoes of Nayaran history. He set off alone, the effects of the potion already beginning to manifest as a subtle shift in his perception. Colors seemed brighter, sounds more distinct. The air itself felt charged with energy. The journey to the grove took several hours, his senses increasingly heightened. The jungle seemed alive in a way he hadn't perceived before. The rustling leaves whispering secrets, the patterns on the bark shifting like Rorschach tests. the interplay of light and shadow suggesting hidden forms. By the time he reached the grove, a hushed sanctuary where colossal trees glowed with a soft, internal luminescence, his reality was beginning to fray at the edges. The air hummed with a low vibration. He sat at the base of the largest tree, its bark cool against his back, and closed his eyes, surrendering to the potion's effects as instructed. The world dissolved. He felt himself falling, not through space, but through layers of consciousness. Images flooded his mind, the terror of the Odyssey's destruction, the faces of lost crewmates, the burning wreckage. Guilt washed over him, sharp and suffocating. Survivor's guilt. Why him? Then, the vision shifted. He was back on Earth, years ago, standing on a windswept cliff overlooking the sea. A younger version of himself, full of ambition and dreams of touching the stars. He saw his family, his old life, the connections he had severed in pursuit of exploration. Loneliness echoed, vast and empty. He saw the choices that had led him here, the sacrifices made, the isolation of deep space travel. Was this the fear he needed to confront? The fear of being utterly alone, disconnected? The jungle itself began to speak, not in words, but in sensations and emotions. He felt the slow, ancient pulse of the trees, the interconnectedness of the roots beneath the soil, the cycle of life and death playing out endlessly. He sensed the Nayarans, their fierce protectiveness of this world, their deep spiritual bond with the ecosystem. He felt Kayla's presence, not physically there, but as a strong, grounding force, her essence intertwined with the fate of her people. Shadows coalesced, taking forms from his deepest anxieties. The razor-scale wyvern surged from the depths of his mind, its eyes burning with cold fury. But this time, he didn't feel terror. He felt understanding. It was a predator, a part of the natural cycle, powerful but not inherently evil. He faced it, acknowledged its strength, and the image faded. Figures appeared, cloaked and menacing, their forms indistinct but radiating avarice and cold calculation. They reached for the glowing trees, their touch leaving decay, their tools ripping into the earth. A vision of the future, a warning, the looming shadow the prophecy spoke of. He saw Kayla, standing defiant against these shadowy figures, her people behind her, spears ready but hopelessly outmatched by the invaders' unseen power. He saw himself standing beside her, no longer an outsider, but a defender. The title Lifebound took on a new meaning, not just bound to Kayla, but bound to the life of this world, responsible for its protection. The visions intensified, becoming overwhelming, threatening to shatter his sense of self. Doubt gnawed at him. He was just one man, shipwrecked, out of his depth. How could he possibly make a difference? What right did he have to interfere in the fate of this world? The fear of failure, of inadequacy, rose like bile in his throat. Face the shadows. Kayla's voice echoed in his mind. Find your truth. His truth. He wasn't a prophesied hero. He was Jason Ward, a pilot who had lost his ship and crew, stranded far from home. But he was also someone who had been shown kindness, accepted despite his otherness, healed by the shaman's hand, guided by Rorik and Lyra, bound by respect and growing affection to Kayla. His truth was that this place, these people, now mattered to him. His truth was that he couldn't stand by and watch them be destroyed. His truth was that even one person, committed and resourceful, could make a difference. He pushed back against the fear, embraced the responsibility. He wasn't defined by the prophecy, but he could choose to fulfill its promise in his own way. He would stand with the Nayarans, offer his knowledge, his skills, his loyalty. He would fight for Nayara Prime, not because fate decreed it, but because he chose to. As this realization settled, the overwhelming intensity of the visions began to recede. The menacing shadows dissolved, replaced by a sense of profound peace and connection. He felt the ancient pulse of the grove, the quiet wisdom of the ancestors, the vibrant life force of the jungle flowing through him. He opened his eyes. The luminous trees glowed softly. The air was still. The psychotropic effects were fading, leaving behind not confusion, but clarity. He rose slowly, feeling weary but strangely centered. He had faced his guilt, his loneliness, his fear of inadequacy, and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew who he was and where he stood. He began the journey back to the village, moving with a quiet confidence he hadn't possessed before. When he emerged from the tree line, Kayla was waiting, alone. She searched his face, her yellow eyes sharp, discerning. She saw the change in him, the quiet resolve that had replaced the haunted look he often carried. She didn't need to ask if he had succeeded. She simply nodded, a flicker of deep satisfaction in her gaze. "You have seen," she stated, her voice low. "I have," Jason confirmed. "I understand what I must do." He hadn't needed to conquer beasts or perform feats of magic. The trial was about conquering himself. He had faced the jungle within and found his place within the jungle without. The vision quest had solidified his bond with Nayara Prime and its people, especially Kayla. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a willing participant in their destiny, ready to face whatever threat the visions had warned him about. The Lifebound prophecy might have brought him here, but his own choices would determine his path forward, side by side with the Beastwoman leader who had claimed him, and whom he was beginning to claim in return. Not as a mate dictated by fate, but as a partner chosen by heart and purpose. Life in the Nayaran village settled into a new rhythm for Jason. Having passed the trials, he was no longer treated with suspicion, but with a camaraderie that felt genuine. He worked alongside the Nayarans, learning their methods of hunting, foraging, and crafting. His technical skills found surprising applications, improving the tension on hunting bows, designing more efficient snares based on simple physics, even reinforcing sections of the treetop walkways using engineering principles. He continued learning the complex, tonal Nayaran language, becoming passively conversational, though Kayla often seemed to understand his intent even when his words failed. His bond with Kayla deepened daily. They spent hours together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sitting in comfortable silence, watching the jungle below or the twin moons rising above the canopy. He learned about her burdens, the responsibility of leading her people, preserving their traditions, protecting them from the dangers of the jungle and the encroaching shadows hinted at in prophecy and his vision quest. She learned about his world, the stars he traveled, the technology he wielded, the loneliness of his past life. A profound respect grew between them, blossoming into a quiet affection that needed no words. The initial shock of the Lifebound declaration faded, replaced by the reality of two individuals from different worlds finding common ground, strength, and solace in each other's company. The idea of being her mate shifted from an alien imposition to a possibility that felt increasingly natural, even desired. But the peace was fragile, the prophetic warnings and Jason's visions casting a long shadow. The shaman, Zathran, spent long hours in meditation, studying ancient carvings and celestial alignments, his brow furrowed with worry. He spoke of an imbalance, a growing darkness felt in the jungle's spiritual currents. The Nayarans grew more watchful, patrols ranging further, their senses on high alert. The blow fell suddenly, shattering the jungle's tranquility. It began not with an attack, but with a sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very air and wood of the village, unfamiliar and deeply unsettling. It was followed by a roar that dwarfed any jungle predator, the sound of powerful engines tearing through the sky above the canopy. Jason knew that sound. Spacecraft, not the gentle descent of an exploration vessel, but the aggressive arrival of dropships. He and Kayla rushed to the highest platform, peering through gaps in the foliage. Three angular, gunmetal gray vessels were descending slowly through the atmosphere, heading towards a region several kilometers east, the site of the ancient temple ruin Zathran had spoken of, a place held sacred but also feared by the Nayarans. On the sides of the ships, a stark logo was visible, a stylized drill bit piercing a planet, encircled by the name Dravex Corporation. Jason's blood ran cold. Dravex. He knew the name. Ruthless, aggressive, an interstellar conglomerate infamous for stripping resources from undeveloped worlds, bypassing regulations, crushing indigenous resistance with overwhelming force. They cared nothing for ecosystems, cultures, or sentient life, only profit. The shadowy figures from his vision quest suddenly had a name and a face. Dravex, he said, the name tasting like poison. They are bad people. Kayla, they take things. They destroy. Kayla watched the ships descend, her face grim, her knuckles white where she gripped the railing. The temple, she growled softly. The place of ancient power. The warnings were true. The Dravex ships landed near the ruins, the sound of their impact echoing through the jungle. Soon after, the distant whine of heavy machinery and the sharp crack of energy weapons firing, likely clearing brush or defensive perimeters, reached the village. Scouts sent by Kayla returned with disturbing reports. Heavily armed soldiers in environmental suits, prefabricated structures being erected, powerful scanning devices probing the earth around the temple complex. Dravex wasn't here for timber or rare minerals. They were after the temple itself, seeking the ancient power Kayla spoke of, likely some form of forgotten, potentially powerful, alien technology. Fear, cold, and sharp, rippled through the village. The Nayarans were formidable warriors against the natural dangers of their world, but they had no defense against energy weapons, armored vehicles, and orbital support. Despair began to set in. We cannot fight their sky metal. One elder lamented during a council meeting. Their weapons burn hotter than the sun's heart. We hide, another suggested. Melt into the deep jungle. Let them take the dead stones. Kayla listened patiently, her face carved from stone. Then she looked at Jason. You know them? Jason. Their ways. Their weapons. Can they be stopped? Jason thought quickly, his mind racing. A direct confrontation was suicide. Hiding might save the people, but it would mean surrendering the temple and whatever power Dravex sought, potentially giving them a weapon or resource that could endanger countless other worlds. And hiding forever wasn't the Nayaran way. They were tied to this land, this forest. There had to be another way. Sabotage, guerrilla tactics, using the jungle itself as a weapon. Directly. No, Jason admitted. Their technology is too advanced. But they don't know this jungle. They don't know its dangers, its secrets. We do. They are strong, but they are also arrogant. They underestimate this world. They underestimate you. We can fight, Kayla, not face to face, but from the shadows. We make them bleed. We make their machines fail. We make them fear the jungle. Hope flickered in Kayla's eyes. Tell us, Jason, tell us how. Over the next few days, Jason, Kayla, Zathran, Auroric, and the tribe's most skilled hunters and trackers devised a plan. Jason drew on his military training and technical knowledge. while the Nayarans contributed their intimate understanding of the terrain, the flora and fauna, and stealth tactics honed over generations. They wouldn't try to destroy Dravex, merely disrupt, delay, and demoralize them, making the cost of their operation outweigh the potential profit. Their first targets were supply lines and reconnaissance patrols. Nayaran hunters, moving like ghosts through the undergrowth, set up elaborate pit traps camouflaged with foliage, deep enough to swallow Dravex exploration vehicles whole. They used blowpipes tipped with fast-acting paralytic darts derived from tree frogs, non-lethal, but effective at disabling soldiers long enough to disarm them and leave them bound for their comrades to find. Shaken and unnerved, Jason helped them rig simple magnetic pulse emitters salvaged from the Odyssey's wreckage, placing them near Dravex comm relays to cause intermittent blackouts and disrupt communications. They coated swinging logs with corrosive sap that ate through the seals of environmental suits. They diverted streams to flood Dravex encampments. They used sonic lures to attract large, aggressive jungle predators towards Dravex patrols, creating chaos and fear. Lyra, with her incredible agility, scaled perimeter fences under the cover of darkness to sabotage power conduits and sensor arrays. Rorik led teams that created false trails, leading Dravex patrols into treacherous swamps or spore fields that caused temporary blindness. Jason participated directly, his pulse pistol used sparingly but effectively to disable security drones or create diversions. His knowledge of standard corporate security protocols allowed him to anticipate Dravex movements and tactics. He felt a grim satisfaction in turning the invaders' technological dependence against them. The campaign of harassment began to take its toll. Dravex progress slowed. Equipment malfunctions increased. Soldiers grew jumpy, firing at shadows, their morale eroding under the constant, unseen pressure. Accidents became more frequent. The jungle, which they had viewed merely as an obstacle, became a tangible enemy. Yet, Dravex pressed on, their focus firmly on the temple ruins, their determination fueled by whatever prize they believed lay within. Scans intensified around the central structure, a crumbling stone pyramid half swallowed by the jungle. Kayla led many of the raids herself, her ferocity and strategic mind inspiring her warriors. She and Jason worked closely, their combined strengths, her intuitive understanding of the jungle and her people, his analytical mind and technical knowledge proving remarkably effective. Their bond deepened further, forged in the crucible of shared danger and purpose. But Jason knew these tactics were only buying time. Dravex was a hydra, cut off one head, and two more would take its place. They needed a more permanent solution. They needed to deny Dravex the prize they sought, convince them the temple held nothing of value, or make the cost of extracting it impossibly high. The final confrontation would have to be at the temple itself, and it would require a sacrifice. Zathran confirmed Jason's fears. The power within the temple wasn't a weapon, but an ancient terraforming device, capable of altering planetary ecosystems on a massive scale, incredibly valuable to a corporation like Dravex, and potentially catastrophic if misused. It was tied to the planet's life force, dormant but detectable by advanced sensors. The Nayarans had guarded it for centuries. Understanding its power was too great to wield. They must not awaken it. Zathran rasped, his eyes dark with urgency. Its energies are unstable. If Dravex tries to force it, the backlash could scar Nayara forever. Then we need to make sure they can never access it. Jason stated grimly. We need to collapse the temple. Bury the device so deep their scans can't find it. Make them believe it was never there, or that it's irretrievably lost. Kayla looked at the ancient shaman, then at Jason, Collapsing the sacred temple, the repository of their ancestors' history, was unthinkable. Yet, the alternative, letting Dravex seize control of the terraformer, was worse. "It is a heavy price," she said softly. "The heaviest," Zathran agreed. "But the jungle endures. Life endures. Stone can be rebuilt. What Dravex seeks must be denied them. For the sake of Nayara, and perhaps many other worlds." The decision was made. They would lure the main Dravex force into the temple, then trigger a controlled demolition, bringing the ancient structure down upon the technology, and hopefully, forcing the corporation to cut its losses. It was a desperate gamble, fraught with risk. Many Nayarans could be lost, and Jason and Kayla would need to be at the heart of the operation, ensuring the collapse was complete. The looming shadow was no longer just a prophecy. It was a corporate gunship overhead, and the final stand was upon them. The plan was audacious, relying on Nayaran's stealth, Jason's technical improvisation, and Dravex's own predictable greed. The Nayarans intensified their harassment tactics, deliberately leaving tantalizingly false clues, fragments of unusual alloys near the temple entrance, fabricated energy signatures, designed to convince Dravex that they were closing in on the main prize, drawing their primary excavation teams and security forces deeper into the ruins. Jason, working with Rorik and a small team, scavenged components from the downed Dravex vehicles and the Odyssey wreckage. His goal was to create remotely triggered explosive charges, powerful enough to destabilize the temple's already crumbling key structural points. It was painstaking work, done in secret caves near the village, shielded from Dravex sensors. He missed the advanced fabrication tools of his own time. Here, everything had to be jury-rigged, connections made by hand, power sources adapted. Kayla prepared her warriors. This wasn't a raid, it was a strategic sacrifice. They would need to create a significant diversion outside the temple to draw away perimeter guards, then engage the Dravex forces within the ruins, just long enough for Jason to place and arm the charges at the critical locations Zathran had identified from ancient structural maps, load-bearing pillars deep within the pyramid's central chamber, where the terraforming device lay dormant. The night of the operation was moonless, the jungle canopy plunging the forest floor into near-total darkness, pierced only by the eerie glow of bioluminescent life. The air was tense, thick with anticipation and the distant thrum of Dravex generators. Jason, Kayla, Zathran, Rorik, Lyra, and a select group of elite warriors moved like wraiths through the jungle towards the Dravex-occupied temple complex. They wore dark pigments smeared on their fur and Jason on his skin, blending seamlessly with the shadows. As they neared the perimeter, the diversion began. On the far side of the Dravex camp, a series of controlled explosions, Nayaran, thunder herbs ignited simultaneously, rocked the jungle, accompanied by terrifying roars amplified using resonant gourds, mimicking the sound of some colossal predator attack. Dravex alarms blared, searchlights swept the canopy. Security teams scrambled towards the fabricated disturbance, leaving the temple approach momentarily less guarded. "Now," Kayla whispered. Her team slipped through the weakened perimeter, disabling automated sentries with targeted shots from blowpipes, carrying fast-acting tranquilizers Jason had helped synthesize. They moved into the outer courts of the temple ruins, encountering the first Dravex patrols. The Nayarans engaged swiftly, silently, using terrain and shadow to their advantage, their obsidian blades and spears finding gaps in armor, their speed and agility overwhelming the surprised soldiers. It was brutal, close-quarters fighting, illuminated by the harsh beams of Dravex flashlights and the sporadic flashes of pulse fire. Jason, Kayla, and Zathran protected by Rorik and Lyra, bypassed the main skirmish, heading directly for the entrance to the central pyramid. Zathran guided them through crumbling corridors marked with faded glyphs, his ancient knowledge invaluable in navigating the maze-like interior. The air grew heavy, charged with a latent energy that made Jason's hair stand on end. The proximity of the dormant terraformer. They reached the central chamber, a vast cavern supported by massive stone pillars. In the center, partially buried, lay the device, a complex structure of interlocking crystalline conduits and metallic alloys unlike anything Jason had ever seen, pulsing with a faint internal light. Dravek's technicians were already working around it, setting up scanning equipment, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. Armed guards stood watch, the pillars. Zathran breathed, pointing to 4 key supports spaced around the chamber. There. The charges must go there. Kayla signaled Rorik and Lyra, while she engaged the guards, drawing their fire with astonishing speed and ferocity. Rorik and Lyra created diversions, darting through the shadows, disabling technicians, sowing chaos. Jason scrambled towards the first pillar, the heavy satchel containing the rigged charges bumping against his side. He worked quickly, his hands surprisingly steady, attaching the first device to a weakened section near the base. Activating its timer sequence via a remote detonator, he kept clutched in his hand. Gunfire erupted. Energy bolts ricocheted off ancient stone. Kayla moved like a phantom, her spear a blur, taking down 2 guards before vaulting behind cover. Rorik disarmed a technician attempting to raise an alarm. Jason sprinted towards the second pillar, the sounds of combat deafening. He placed the second charge. 2 more to go. A Dravek's heavy weapon trooper entered the chamber, laying down suppressing fire. Jason was pinned down behind a fallen stone block. Kayla saw his predicament. With a piercing war cry, she launched herself from cover, tackling the trooper, her strength and momentum sending them both crashing to the ground. She grappled with the armored soldier, buying Jason precious seconds. He reached the third pillar, slapping the charge into place. 1 left. He glanced at the timer. Less than 5 minutes. Lyra bought him cover, shattering the lights with well-aimed stones, plunging sections of the chamber into disorienting darkness. He sprinted towards the final pillar, located perilously close to the terraforming device itself. As he secured the last charge, activating its sequence, a searing pain shot through his shoulder. A stray energy bolt had grazed him. He stumbled, dropping the detonator. He scrabbled for it, his vision blurring. A Dravek soldier loomed over him, rifle raised. Before the soldier could fire, Rorik landed silently from above, his knife finding its mark. "Jason, go!" Rorik yelled, pulling him towards the exit Zathran was indicating. Kayla disengaged from the trooper, leaving him stunned, and joined them, grabbing Jason's arm, supporting his weight. Lyra covered their retreat, slowing their pursuers. They raced back through the crumbling corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Zathran led them unerringly towards a side passage, a hidden escape route known only to the shamans. As they burst out into the humid night air, away from the main structure, Jason raised the detonator, his hand trembling. He looked at Kayla, her face smudged with grime, her eyes blazing. "Now." She nodded grimly. For Nayara. He thumbed the activation switch. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep rumble started from within the pyramid, growing rapidly into a deafening roar. The ground shook violently. With a series of echoing cracks, the massive stone pillars gave way. The entire central pyramid shuddered, groaned, and then imploded inwards, collapsing into a mountain of rubble, dust, and debris, burying the central chamber. the Dravex equipment, the dormant terraformer, and any remaining soldiers deep beneath tons of ancient stone. The shockwave washed over them, followed by an almost deafening silence. The Dravex operation at the temple had been decisively, catastrophically ended. Jason watched the dust cloud rise, illuminated by the remaining Dravex lights, feeling a grim sense of finality. They had done it. They had protected Nayara's secret, but the cost, counted in Nayaran lives lost in the diversion and the assault, was heavy. Kayla looked towards the village, her expression filled with sorrow for the fallen, but also fierce determination. They had won this battle, preserved their world, but the war against forces like Dravex was far from over, and the future of the Lifebound and his Nayaran mate remained uncertain. In the aftermath of the temple's collapse, a heavy quiet settled over the jungle, broken only by the crackle of Dravex equipment fires and the distant, panicked shouts of the surviving corporate soldiers realizing the extent of the disaster. The main prize was gone, buried beyond recovery, their expeditionary force decimated. Kayla's warriors, having successfully executed the diversion and withdrawn with calculated losses, regrouped silently in the shadows, tending to their wounded. The cost had been significant, but the strategic objective was achieved. Dravex Corporation, faced with catastrophic equipment loss, heavy casualties, and the apparent destruction or inaccessibility of their target technology, did exactly what Jason predicted. They cut their losses. Within hours, the remaining Dravex personnel scrambled back to their dropships. The ground vibrated as the powerful engines roared to life, lifting the gunmetal gray vessels back into the sky, away from the cursed green hell of Nayara Prime. They left behind smoldering wreckage, abandoned prefabs, and the newly created mountain of rubble where the ancient temple once stood, a testament to the Nayaran's fierce defense and Jason's desperate gamble. Victory felt hollow as Jason watched the ships disappear into the clouds. He stood beside Kayla on a high ridge, overlooking the scarred landscape, his shoulder bandaged, the adrenaline fading to reveal deep exhaustion and the ache of loss. Zathran chanted softly nearby, a lament for the fallen warriors and the desecrated sacred site. "They are gone," Jason said quietly. "For now," Kayla replied, her gaze distant. "Others like them may come. The sky holds many dangers. We showed them Nayara fights back," Jason countered, though he knew she was right. The galaxy was vast, and rapacious corporations like Dravex were numerous. In the days that followed, the tribe mourned their dead with solemn rituals, celebrating their bravery while grieving their loss. The village slowly returned to its rhythm, but the Dravex invasion had left an indelible mark. They had faced an existential threat from beyond the sky and survived, thanks to a combination of ancient resilience and unexpected help from a sky-fallen outsider. Jason's role was undeniable. He had provided crucial knowledge, tactical insight, and the means to achieve their victory. He was, truly, the Lifebound who had helped protect them from the looming shadow. Yet, his presence also posed a long-term risk. Dravex knew he was here. Survivors would report encountering a human fighting alongside the natives. If Dravex, or any other interstellar power, investigated further, they might connect Jason to the destroyed Odyssey, potentially bringing the full might of human galactic authorities or corporate rivals down on Nayara Prime, seeking retribution or simply the resources Dravex had failed to claim. The very act of saving the Nayarans had potentially endangered them further. This painful truth became clear during a council meeting with Kayla, Zathran, and the elders. Zathran, ever the pragmatist despite his spiritual role, voiced the concern gently but firmly. Jason is lifebound. He has fulfilled the prophecy, stood with us against the darkness. Our debt to him is immeasurable, but his presence, it paints a target on our world. Those sky people, Dravex, they know a human fought them. They may return, seeking him or seeking answers. An elder nodded gravely. To protect Nayara, perhaps. Perhaps the lifebound must leave Nayara. The words hung heavy in the air. Jason felt a cold dread seep into him. Leave. Leave Kayla. Leave this world that had become his refuge, his purpose. He looked at Kayla, his heart aching. Her expression was unreadable, masked by the heavy weight of leadership. She had to consider what was best for her people, their long-term survival. Is this what you wish, Kayla? Jason asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kayla met his gaze, her luminous yellow eyes filled with a profound sadness that mirrored his own. What I wish, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, is for your safety, Jason, and for the safety of my people. The two may not be able to coexist now. Zathran speaks wisdom, hard though it is to hear. If your presence brings greater danger down upon us, then. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jason understood. It was the logical, necessary choice for the tribe's sovereignty and safety. His connection to the outside galaxy made him a liability. To truly protect Nayara, he had to disappear from it. Let the wider universe believe the Odyssey was lost without a trace. Its pilot perished on an uncharted world. It was a sacrifice. Perhaps the final trial the prophecy implicitly demanded. There might be a way, Jason said slowly, an idea forming. Painful but necessary. Dravex retreated, but they likely left surveillance drones, listening posts in orbit, watching. If they see me leave, if they intercept a signal, it could confirm their suspicions. But what if? What if I didn't leave? What if I died? Kayla recoiled slightly. Jason. No, not truly, he quickly clarified. A staged death. We can use parts from the Dravex wreckage, create a small beacon using their frequency, send a final, corrupted data burst, something that sounds like a failing biomonitor signal. Then silence it permanently, make it look like the lone survivor succumbed to his injuries or the jungle. Dravex retrieves the signal fragment, assumes I'm dead, closes the file. The Odyssey remains lost. Nayara remains uncharted, forgotten, protected. Zathran considered it, stroking his chin, a deception. Risky, but perhaps necessary. The plan was agreed upon, heavy hearts accepting its grim necessity. Jason spent his last few days working on the beacon, salvaging components, programming the false signal. Every moment with Kayla felt precious, tinged with the bitterness of impending separation. They spoke little of the departure, instead focusing on the shared present, the quiet understanding that flowed between them. On the final night, they stood together on the highest platform, watching the twin moons trace silver paths across the sky. The jungle below was alive with nocturnal sounds, peaceful now. You will be safe, Jason murmured. And you? Kayla asked, her voice low. Where will you go? How? There's enough functional equipment left in my escape pod's emergency cache, he explained. A small distress beacon, short-range keyed to exploration core frequencies, not corporate ones. Once I'm far enough away, clear of any lingering Dravex sensors, I can activate it. It won't lead them back here. It'll just signal a lone survivor adrift. Will you return? The question was barely audible, heavy with unspoken hope. Jason reached out, gently touching her cheek. Her fur was soft beneath his fingers. Nayara is part of me now. Kayla, you are part of me. I don't know how or when, but I will find a way back. I promise." Their farewell was not tearful, but filled with a deep, aching gravity. Under the light of the twin moons, they held each other close, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged between the pilot from the stars and the Beastwoman leader of the jungle world. It wasn't the end dictated by prophecy, but a choice made for survival, tempered by love and the hope of reunion. The next morning, Jason, with Rorik's help, carried the rigged beacon deep into the jungle. Far from the village, he activated it, sending the falsified dying transmission signal pulsing outwards on Dravek's frequencies. Then, she destroyed the device utterly, returning to his original crash site. He salvaged the emergency beacon from the escape pod wreckage. With a final look back towards the hidden village, a silent promise echoing in his heart, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the emerald depths of the Nayaran jungle, leaving behind the world he had fought for, the people he had come to care for, and the leader who held his heart. He was erasing himself to protect them, trusting in the future, trusting in his promise to return. 1 year passed. On Nayara Prime, life continued. The jungle reclaimed the scars left by Dravex, vines crawling over the abandoned machinery, moss softening the edges of the collapsed temple mound. Kayla led her people with quiet strength. The memory of the invasion and the Lifebound sacrifice woven into their history, a reminder of their resilience and the fragility of their peace. Zathrin reported that the spiritual currents of the jungle were calm, the imbalance caused by Dravex slowly healing. Rorik and Lyra became respected leaders among the younger warriors, sharing the lessons learned during the conflict. Kayla often found herself looking towards the sky, a quiet ache in her heart, holding on to the memory of a promise whispered under twin moons. Far away, Jason Ward had navigated his own challenges. His short-range beacon had eventually been picked up by a passing freighter, far from Nayaran space. His fabricated story, sole survivor of a ship lost to a spatial anomaly, drifting for months, was accepted. Aided by his genuine trauma and emaciated condition, after weeks of surviving a lone post, departure from Nayara, he spent months recuperating, debriefing, carefully omitting any mention of Nayara Prime or the Nayarans, ensuring the planet remained uncharted. Protected, he resisted pressure to rejoin the Exploration Corps immediately, instead taking an extended leave, citing psychological trauma. He needed time. He needed to keep his promise. Using salvaged credits and skills honed over years of service, he began working independently, taking on discreet transport jobs on the galactic fringe, slowly acquiring resources, contacts, and eventually, a small, unassuming starship capable of atmospheric entry. Equipped with stealth technology, he meticulously plotted a return course to Nayara Prime, erasing his ship's registry, traveling through unmonitored space lanes, taking every precaution to ensure his arrival would go unnoticed by any lingering corporate or governmental censors. It took a full year, but finally, he was back in orbit, the emerald and sapphire jewel of Nayara Prime filling his viewport once more. He chose his landing site carefully, miles away from the village, deep within a secluded valley. His descent was silent, shielded by his ship's stealth systems. He hid the vessel beneath a dense canopy, camouflaging it thoroughly, then clad in simple, durable clothing suited to the jungle, carrying only essential supplies and the Nayaran knife he had kept. He began the journey back on foot. The jungle felt familiar, welcoming. He moved with a confidence born of experience, his senses attuned to the environment. He recognized the plants, the animal calls, the subtle shifts in the wind. It felt like coming home. He approached the village cautiously, observing from a distance first, Life seemed peaceful. Children played on the rope bridges. Hunters returned with their catches. Smoke curled from the cooking fires. He saw Rorik, Lyra, Zathran, and then he saw Kaela, standing on the central platform, looking out over the jungle, her posture regal, strong, yet somehow solitary. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked out of the tree line into the clearing at the base of the great trees. A Nayaran child spotted him first, pointing with a startled chirp. Heads turned. A silence fell over the village as recognition dawned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jason, the Lifebound. Kayla's head snapped towards the sound. Her eyes widened, disbelief warring with a sudden, fierce joy. She didn't hesitate. She vaulted over the railing of the platform, landing lightly on the ground below, and ran towards him, her usual reserved dignity forgotten. Jason met her halfway, and they collided in an embrace that spoke volumes more than words ever could. He held her tightly, burying his face in her soft fur, the scent of her, of the jungle, overwhelming him. She clung to him, a low, rumbling purr vibrating in her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated happiness. "You came back," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I promised," he replied, his voice equally unsteady. The tribe gathered around them, not with the awe of greeting a prophesied savior this time, but with the warmth of welcoming back a lost member of the family. Zathran approached, a rare, wide smile creasing his aged face. "The path finds its way home," the old shaman said, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. Jason wasn't hailed as a returning hero or the fulfillment of prophecy. He was simply Jason, who had left to protect them and had now returned, keeping his word. His integration back into the tribe was seamless, natural. He shared stories of his journey, carefully edited, and listened intently to the tales of the past year. He offered his help not as an outsider with superior knowledge, but as a partner, his skills blending with theirs. He and Kyla rediscovered their bond, deeper now, tested by separation and strengthened by reunion. It wasn't a destiny forced upon them by ancient words, but a future they actively chose, built on mutual respect, shared experience, and a love that transcended worlds. Together, they led the Nayarans, not by clinging to old prophecies, but by fostering resilience, adapting to new challenges, and cherishing the peace they had fought so hard to protect. Jason Ward, the pilot who crashed from the stars, had found his true home, not in the cold expanse of space or the rigid structure of the core, but here, under the vibrant canopy of Nayara Prime, beside the fierce, intelligent Beastwoman who was not just his prophesied mate, but his chosen partner. Their future, and the future of the Nayaran people, would be one they forged together, grounded not in fate, but in love, courage, and the enduring power of choosing one's own destiny. The jungle thrived, and within its heart, so did they. Finally at peace, finally home.